Hi King and Queen of Elfhame are back, baby! This video is about to be so long, but you cannot give me another The Folk of the Air book and not expect me to go feral. Hi, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if it's your first time here. I'm Lindsay and I'm a big fan of The Folk of the Air, so this is my Prisoner's Throne review, which is really just me like rambling about the series forever and ever and ever and ever. So I have been waiting so impatiently for this book to come out, and now that I have it and I've read it, I am absolutely buzzing. I had a knot in my stomach after the ending of The Stolen Heir, and I had to wait for this to come out, as you do. I know how this works. I've been a reader for a while. However, loving this series as much as I do, I'm so happy that I finally know what happens. I did kind of devour the series. I tried to take it slowly, so I took about a week and a half. And I know I could have gone slower, but as soon as I got it, I just kind of went a little bit feral, because you end the last one with an imprisoned Oak yelling out to Wren, wearing the riddle that was formerly hers, and I like expect me to wait a year for the next one. Again, I know that's how it works, and that's what I prefer, because I want you to take your time with a series so it's done well. But I still was going feral, as I am now. Also, not to mention, it was teased back in October, I believe, that Jude and Cardan have a bigger part in the series, because they weren't really in the last book. They were more just so mentioned in the last book, but they were here. They were in this book, and they are my favorites. They are my blurbos. I love them so much that as soon as I saw that, I was chomping at the bit to read this book. Side tangent, but when I read the Cruel Prince trilogy, the original Folk of the Air trilogy, I thought for sure that I'd read the next fantasy romance book I had and I'd ship that couple just as hard. But for some reason, no one has the hold on me that Jude and Cardan do. I love Wren and Oak very much, but everyone else I've just kind of liked, and maybe it's because no one quite simps like Cardan did. I mean, Oak is quite the simp too, but there's just something about Cardan and Jude that they are so special to me. Like Cardan, I've called him this before, poor little meow meow. He's such a poor little meow meow, and like I don't really have book boyfriends because I tend to ship them with whoever they're shipped with. Like I really ship Cardan and Jude, but I do love Cardan. I do love him so much, and Jude I think has been one of my favorite protagonists of all time. All of that was to say that knowing that Cardan and Jude were coming back, my babies, my blurbos, made the wait all that much harder, but we made it. I've read it, and I've done my best to put all my thoughts down in a coherent way to make this video coherent, even though, like I've said, I really love The Folk of the Air, and I tend to get a bit rambly when I really love something, so bear with me, but we're gonna try to make it through this, okay? There will be so many spoilers in this video. It's not gonna be spoiler free in the slightest, like I usually try to make my videos. I just cannot talk about this without talking about spoilers. My original The Folk of the Air video that I made has so many spoilers. I don't know, I have a lot of thoughts, many thoughts swirling through my head. I gotta get them all out, I guess. So first and foremost, I would like to address the absolutely wild family dynamic of, okay, this is Oak's point of view. This book is Oak's point of view. And your one adopted sister is married to your uncle, while your other adopted sister had a son with your half-brother who she killed. So the scene in the beginning, I mean, the scene in the very beginning, in the prologue, where they're at the royal family table, and Oak's like, the only people here I'm blood related to are my adopted sister Jude's husband, Cardan, and my adopted sister Taryn, Jude's twin, her son, Leander. And I just felt like someone with a corkboard and red string when I'm talking about this family. It's so wild, and I love it so much. I love a complicated family dynamic. Moving on, as I already said, this book is from Oak's point of view. We know the first one's from Wren's point of view, and I did really enjoy getting Wren's point of view, learning more about her backstory, her mentality, how she's kind of looks like she can kill you, is a cinnamon roll, could also kill you, but personality-wise, she's a cinnamon roll. And Oak, looks like a cinnamon roll and could kill you, and we learn in this book why he's like that, and even more so why Wren is the way she is. Now, there were things we can conclude about Oak from Wren's point of view, however, and just the original trilogy as well. However, really learning about him and the way his childhood that we witnessed from Jude's point of view affected him, the way all of the sacrifices that his family made and the way they protected him, the way it affected him in multiple different ways. One of them in the beginning we find out is just the way that he feels like he owes them for all of that, and that motivates him in a lot of things that he does. Not to mention, it seemed like by being sheltered by his family, he really loves his family, and that's something that comes up repeatedly, and he feels like he owes them, as I already said. But there's still some resentment there because they sheltered him and he didn't know about all of the horrors of fairy. Kind of similarly to how Vivi just kind of like threw Heather into the world and was like, welcome, but it's a little different because Oak is fae. But he just like didn't know why he had to learn how to sword fight and defend himself. And you kind of got to explain those things to a child. And then, this something I didn't really think about in the original trilogy while I was reading that, is how everything happened, kind of that war all revolved around Oak. Madoc did what he did to try to get Oak in power to rule through him, as I'm sure you already know, but I didn't really think about how that would affect Oak mentally. Now that it's Oak's point of view, you kind of realize, yeah, he has this idea, which is really sad, that if he didn't exist, none of that whole war wouldn't have happened. And really it's all Madoc's fault, it's all his doing, but you can understand where Oak's coming from with that, which again makes me very sad, but it makes sense. I had sympathy for Oak in the other books. I'm sure a lot of readers had sympathy for Oak in the other books, but like Jude in the original trilogy, and Wren in The Stolen Heir, and Cardan in How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories and his excerpts in the special editions, and that one part where it was his point of view to explain what happened between him and Dane. You get to empathize with that character even more. Reading from their point of view, you connect with them better. You have a deeper understanding of this character and their perspective and where they're coming from with their actions when you get their point of view. As I already said, you empathize with them better, and that's what I really, really like about spin-offs where it's someone else's point of view. I mean, like I said, love Cardan and Jude, want more of them, but it's really cool to have a spin-off with someone else's point of view to understand their side of the story better. And we got a whole new story going on here because it's a lot older, there's new things happening. One of those new things with this new character is a new type of magic. We have his honey tongue magic. I can't remember the fae name for it, I'll write it up here. But you learn about how this power affects him mentally, how he uses it, and how he's not sure if it's just kind of always a part of him, if he's really good at manipulating, or if this power just kind of embodies him. He made it very clear he knows when it's truly taking over him and he's letting it take control. However, there's also a part where Oriana tells him that part of the magic is knowing what to say to people to get what you want. You know what they want to hear. So is he just really good with people? Is he good at talking to people, or is he always telling people what they want to hear? Is he saying that kind of stuff without thinking? And who is there that can really tell him about this power? No one. His mom, his true mom, and his half-brother, they're both dead, so he's kind of on his own with this power. Although, I am very curious, it wasn't touched on in this book, but I'm so curious to find out if Leander has that power. He might. But then we get into the sad part, where he worries that the only reason people in his life like him, even including his Oriana's adopted mom and adopted sisters, we're just gonna say mom sisters because that's what he calls them, because that's what they are. He worries that the only reason they like him and they made so many sacrifices for him is because of this power. If it's just oozing off of him and he can't help it, and it just has kind of an aura of that they're have to like him. But as the reader, you can kind of conclude that's not true from reading other people's point of views. Like Wren's point of view in the first book, yes, she's attracted to him, but she's very resistant to it. It's not this like obsessive kind of attraction that people would like die for him in this way that is described to him when he uses his power. And the same with Jude, it just felt very much like he's my little brother, I'm gonna protect him. It was very much a familial thing that she would have done for multiple members of her family. Not to mention, she also had some harsh feelings towards him at time because he was fae, and she had some harsh feelings towards all the fae, but also because of the fact that he used his powers when he was younger and she was younger to make her hit herself repeatedly. So she had these bad memories of him. She wasn't like constantly liking him, and it feels like if he's constantly using that power, wouldn't she be constantly liking him? He was not the curse to his family he thought he was, and it breaks my heart that he thought that. And honestly, adding to what I said earlier, it's probably best that he didn't learn his magic from Liriope and Locke, because they likely would have had him using it for power. I mean, that's kind of what they did. And Oriana told him to be careful what he uses it for and when he's using it, and that not everyone has to like him or love him. So, good message here. Because also, when he does talk to Fox Locke in that kind of half-dead dream he has, it wasn't very helpful, because Locke just, you know, tells him that despite Oak insisting he's not like his mom and brother, Locke's like, well, you don't know our mom, and also, you're gonna get killed by your lovers just like us. That's what happens when you have this power. And so, we know Locke sucks. I did for a second wonder if it was foreshadowing in some kind of way, whether it was he's gonna kill his lover or whatever, someone's gonna kill their lover. But very quickly I realized, number one, you can't trust Locke. Number two, the difference between Locke and Liriope, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Is it Liriope? Liriope? I don't know. The difference between him and them is he genuinely loved Wren. Locke definitely didn't love Terran, and I don't think Liriope loved Eldred or Dane, you know? It didn't come off as that, so, you know, it's different. Especially since Oak is the one pining over Wren now, and can I just say, Holly Black knows how to write a man that's down so bad for a terrifying woman. Love that. Love to see a man that is so down bad for a badass woman, even though he's equally important, but he is a simp. It's such an important quality for a male character, to be so down bad, so pathetically down bad, such a simp, so in love. So Cardan and Oak, while similar in many ways, are also different in many ways, and Jude and Wren are different in many ways, but Cardan and Oak, one thing they have in common are being so down bad for their terrifying queen, and that's something that Wren and Jude have in common, terrifying queens. Speaking of differences and similarities, I really want to touch on this. Like I said, Cardan and Oak definitely have similarities, but I think when it comes to portrayal, Cardan and Wren are very similar because they portray themselves, they hide their interior the way they really are by being monstrous, by acting cruel, by acting evil, when we all know truly deep down, they're just hurt. They're kind, good people that were just hurt and had rough childhoods. And then there's Jude and Oak that I think are similar in the way that they might be perceived as weak for different reasons. Jude being she's immortal, and Oak being like he acts very feckless and irresponsible. But they are so powerful and can and will kill you. And not to mention the parallel between Cardan and Wren saying crawl to me, I screamed. But I will give Oak that he is a sassy little shit and down bad, just like his uncle. And he even mentions, we'll get into this later. And Wren is like Jude in the sense that they will push themselves to the extreme to be powerful. They'll push themselves past their limits and have that kind of mentality if, instead of being scared, I'll become something to fear. And I may not have gotten that quote completely perfectly, but Wren basically has a very similar quote in this book where she says, where Oak says she seems to have realized that instead of being scared, she can become the things that she was scared of. And then there's the fact that Wren and, I almost said Terran, Wren and Jude both have trust issues, but I was going to say that pretty much everyone in this book has trust issues, which is completely understandable, and that's something I will get more into as well. Because I want to talk about Oak's worry that Cardan secretly wants to get rid of him because Cardan thinks he's after the crown. More about trust issues, but it's understandable. His distrust of the royal family and his family, considering what they have done, makes a lot of sense. As mentioned in the book, Oak may believe that Cardan doesn't trust him because he's not going to trust any of his family, considering what his siblings did to each other. And going even further than that, Oak may believe that Cardan has dislike of the royal family, considering what they did to his mom, which I have so much to say about real quick. Because that goes with my analysis that I kind of touched on a little bit in a different video. So Jude dreamt that Locke told her in a dream that he only dated her to get at Cardan, not just to test Terran, but to get at Cardan, because he likes messing with Cardan. But it's not just that he likes messing with Cardan, it's that, in my theory, he really dislikes the royal family, hates the royal family, for killing his mom. So that's why he's kind of always messing with Cardan, like the making Jude the Queen of Mirth and all that kind of stuff, and becoming his rebel master to keep him feckless and unfit to be king. Because in my original video of the Folk of the Air, I did say that I hated Locke because his motive was just to make a fun story. It was always just fun that he would kill people for fun. He just liked mischief. But I've realized now that his motive was revenge. I mean, you look at what he did to the ghost. He knew the ghost was the one who poisoned his mom. So it was all about revenge. I still don't like him, very much so, but I just think that was interesting. These things that you can discover even well after you've read the book, just reanalyzing this kind of stuff. Love to do it. Love to figure this stuff out. Love to nitpick. Love this series. That also kind of comes back into play in this story because Hyacinth knows that it wasn't Dane who directly poisoned Oak's mom, Oak and Locke's mom. So he confronts Oak about that and he's like, if you want me to help you take this riddle off, you have to find the person who poisoned your mom because it was the ghost, it was Garrett, got past Hyacinth's dad. So that kind of complicated things, and it maybe was like, no, that's your buddy, because he made Oak promise that he would bring him his hand. I realize I haven't made any sense here. Hyacinth made Oak promise that he would bring the hand of the person who poisoned Oak's mom to Hyacinth. And I was very upset because we already know at this point in the book that Garrett helped like train Oak and taught him training exercises that he could do and this kind of stuff. So I was like, no, that's your buddy, that's your pal, don't, like, I know it's a very complicated situation and why you might hold hard feelings towards him, but he's not a bad guy. It's a complicated situation, Oak. Because then he trusts Garrett, he trusts the ghost, so he asks him if he knows who poisoned his mom, and I was just like, I was on the edge of my seat. And then he finds out from a child. He finds out from Leander, just, you know, talking nonsense as children do, just saying things they probably shouldn't say. And oh, that broke my heart. That whole thing. Cause then he doesn't understand how Jude and Taryn are so close with Garrett when they know this happened. I mean, Taryn is extra close with him, but they would understand what it's like to feel powerless, especially Jude, who worked for Dane, would understand, like, you have to do what he says. There's no, like, you have no power there. And this part was just so emotional. Because also, Jude knows the whole story about what happens to Garrett afterwards. When Locke gets his true name, she knows he was tortured. She knows he, like, kind of paid his dues there. Cause then it comes full circle. Okay, obviously I'm going off the rails here. It comes full circle because he is poisoned with the same poison that he poisoned Liriope, if I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm sorry, Oak's mom with. And Oak is poisoned as well, but survives because we know he has the resistance to blush mushroom because he was born with it in his blood. It's so sad. And I screamed. I was like, not the ghost. Like, someone had to die. I understand someone had to die. Makes me so sad. But because also he knew something. As soon as he was poisoned, you know he knows something. But then, and then Oak's reaction where he's like, I want to hate him. I want to be okay with this, but I'm not. I'm sad. I couldn't hate him. Despite the fact that he was responsible for my mom's death in a way, I can't hate him. And that's so mature of you, Oak. He's like 17, 18. So mature of you. And I felt so bad for Taryn. I know she's not a favorite. I know a lot of people hold hard feelings towards her. She was just traumatized in the same way Jude was. She just dealt with it a lot differently and tried to find safety in very stupid ways, gonna be honest. But she was also 17 and traumatized, so I don't hold any resentment towards her. I mean, Jude doesn't, so why should we? But also, I just, like, Locke was awful, and I was really hoping that she could have a happy relationship with the ghost, which she did for a long time, I wish it was forever. And, I mean, he's a tree now, and like someone said, I think it was Oak, that was like, well, maybe down the line someone will figure out how to fix that. And maybe it'll be Wren, now that getting ahead of myself, now that she can create, but let me just dial that down because I'm getting way ahead of myself. So back to Oak's relationship with Cardan. I think that was a fun little subplot. He clearly doesn't seem to hate Cardan the way Locke did. He was just worried Cardan hated him and Cardan was suspicious of him. But I got the vibe almost immediately that Cardan, just because knowing Cardan, but I got the vibe that Cardan was on to Oak's scheming with the conspiracies and that he kind of saw himself in Oak, and so he was just like, I love how as a reader, Oak is telling you one thing, but when you're reading between the lines, when Oak is calling himself and saying that he acts as if he's feckless and irresponsible and that kind of stuff, that you know, if you've read the original trilogy, you know that Cardan was the same way, and he was also kind of putting on a front, and he's not this idiot that he presents himself to be. And so you're like, Cardan probably just sees himself in you. And when it was revealed that Cardan was onto him, and Cardan was like, I've been there, buddy. I also didn't want to be a king when I was, you know, a teenager. I completely understand it. I screamed. I was like, I can actually analyze books. I actually know what I'm reading. What? I just felt like a little bit, you know, like a god for a second. His darling god, if you will. Anyway, something I really love about these books, these series, is the subtext. The subtext, as I said with Locke, like a lot of that on the surface, they're telling you he's just mischievous, but then it's like subtext, he wants revenge. And like with this, it's like subtext. There's so much subtext, and I love when things aren't spelled out for me. I love being able to analyze a book, especially when it comes to relationships. This is not relevant to this book, but when it's like enemies to lover relationships, don't tell me that they're attracted to their enemy. Tell me that their pulse is elevating, or like they're sweating but they think it's just nerves, or they think it's just adrenaline or whatever, but we as the audience can tell like there's an attraction there, there's something more going on there. Until they absolutely have to reveal their feelings, don't tell me that they're like, I love him but I don't want to because he's my enemy. Like, that's not enemies to lovers to me. That's just you're in love. Back to Oak playing the fool. I love how when he realized, had he not played this irresponsible person, perhaps Jude would have trusted him to begin with. But we later find out she trusted him anyway, because she was like, I know my brother. But it is a complicated situation, especially from Jude's point of view, because she does, like I said, she did trust him, and even had she trusted him and told him this stuff, she probably still wouldn't have wanted him to go to rescue Matic and all this kind of stuff, because he is her little brother. But as we get to the end, she's like, I can trust you to make the right choices, and clearly you know how to fight, so like you're gonna be safe, but you're my little brother. Like it makes sense for her to be like protective over him. But I did really, really love him realizing there's a different way for him to be. He doesn't have to hide who he is, especially from his family, and he can still get the outcomes he desires, and how Wren knows who he truly is and still loves him, and that kind of was motivation for all of this. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk about the romance between them later, even though I've kind of touched on it a little, but I have lots to say. I have lots to say. While reading, I was also analyzing Oak and how he kept mentioning his childhood in the mortal world, which I feel like could have a lot of parallels. I don't know if Holly Black had this purpose while doing this. I mean, no one knows except for her. Whether it was to show how he was a fae creature getting raised in the mortal world while he had these mortal sisters getting raised in the fae world, and the juxtaposition there, as well as Wren being a fae creature who kind of started her life in the mortal world but was on the outskirts when she came back to the mortal world. She didn't grow up. She grew up more like, for lack of better words, a wild animal. I mean, I think they kind of say that in the book as well. Whereas Oak had this childhood where he was going to school and playing games, and he was actually assimilated to mortal life. Because I'm really comparing this to, even though I compared it to like Taryn and Jude growing up in Elfheim, it really comparing it to the last book, to the Stolen Heir. When you look at the difference between the memories of Oak's, like, I grew up in Vivi and Heather's apartment playing video games and eating pizza and watching anime, whereas Wren grew up like in the woods eating garbage, like waiting for her her sister, she's her sister, we call her that in this book, she's her sister, to leave out milk for her. Like, it's a very, very different childhood for both of them. And I mean, that's Wren's memories in the mortal world. A lot of her childhood memories are being like this slave to Lord Geralt and Lady So it might have seemed silly at times for him to be bringing that up, but when you really put it into perspective of like the difference between his point of view and Wren's point of view, that's where I felt like that was the purpose of that being brought up. Not to mention when you learn about how much he hates killing and when he had to be taught how to sword fight and kill and that kind of stuff, he was comparing it to playing a video game, and I was like, video games are fun. Things are supposed to be fun. I don't want to do this. It's not fun in real life. I just want to do it in video games where it's fun. And I think another neat part about having Oak's point of view and not just having Wren's point of view for these two books is that Wren says in the first book that when Oak is fighting, he has this kind of like glassed over look in his eyes. They go very dark, and he kind of seems possessed, and then you learn from Oak's point of view that it is almost like that because he just blacks out and he has no thoughts, and it's just nothing but fight. It's just instinct of fighting at that point. And he doesn't even know what happens until he was done. And then we found out that Maddox literally beat that into him, where fighting becomes an instinct, where he has no thoughts except win until the fighting is done. Like, he turns off his brain and he disconnects. It's a very interesting thing to watch him experience, not watch him, but read him experiencing from his point of view, and then kind of hearing about him and reading. Why do I keep saying hearing and seeing? It's reading about him kind of trying to break out of that in fights. There's like, he lets it take over sometimes, but for the most part, there's one part where he's actively trying to break out of it, and then another part where he's just like consciously like, I'm not going to do that, and then he doesn't. And this is kind of a little bit off topic. It goes more so with the magic though. Maddox teaching him this fighting skill could also go with this. I think a small underlying theme, not the big main one, could be nature versus nurture. It might be Oak's nature to use his magic for power, but his nurture with being, or like his nature with his birth mom is this power to use people to get them to love you, all that kind of stuff. But then you have the nurture of Oriana telling him not to do that. You have his nature of not wanting to kill people, and then the opposite nurture of Maddox beating into him, you have to do this. And then Wren, even her nature versus nurture, it's very complicated for her, because at first she was raised by loving, caring people and she had this family, and then she was taken away and tortured, and so she has this kind of internal pull, and she also, you know, is a witch and has that kind of nature and has Bookdana who made her. So she has this internal pull of like, I'm good, I'm bad, I'm a monster, I'm this and that and the other thing, and then she ends up just kind of being a monster and presenting herself like a monster, much like Cardan, to protect herself. Not to mention she has Melis memories, which we didn't really get into because it was that much, because it wasn't her point of view, but you kind of think like, okay, she has the memories of like, more memories of Bookdana being Bogdana being a bad mom and that kind of stuff, and plus she continues to be very manipulative, and so she has this feeling of like, I can't be loved, so that's going to push her even further and cement that idea that she has that she should be a monster, and it's very sad. But that's also a connection between Oak and Wren in some ways, because they have these parental issues. Oak might have been raised by Oriana and his loving sisters, but his real, Maddox tried to use him for power, and his real dad tried to have him killed. So he has a lot of family issues as well. So as he even said in the book, he also understands that just because you're related by blood doesn't mean there's love there. He doesn't have any love for Dane, he doesn't know him, and he just knows he tried to kill him. And Bookdana obviously doesn't really love Wren, so I think that is the big message of the story, is that you don't owe your like manipulative, controlling family members anything. Just because they created you, you don't have to do what they say. We also have Oak understanding that they might not even be outright manipulating you, but just even the fact that they're your blood and you feel like you can't disobey them and you can't go against them. It is a lot further than that with Wren and Bookdana, but it is similar the way he feels with Maddox with that situation to where she might feel with Bookdana. Another common ground I think that they have is that they both don't like their power. Wren's is literally destruction in the beginning, and Oak's can be destructive in the way that it can make people so like obsessive with him to their own detriment. But we will talk about this more later. They both have a growth there where the power becomes more so creation. And another connection that is very sad is they both have a lot of pain that they hide in their own unique ways. Wren, she puts on that mask that she is a monster, she is evil, and she will keep doing evil. Oak just hides everything with a smile and acting like he's a fool. And it's so sad to read their different point of views and see how similar they are, even if it's in different ways, and just like how they just both want to be loved. It makes me so sad. Like they both thought they were undeserving of love. And it just made me so sad. And as I mentioned, the parallel between Madoc and Oak and Bogdana and Oak, there's one as well with Oriana and Oak where he has a moment where he realizes just because she saved him, just because she raised him, she cannot rule over his life because she keeps telling him not to marry Wren and all that. And that's pretty much what Wren has to go through with Bogdana, except of course with Oriana and Oak it's way less extreme because it's not, Bogdana does some very awful things. But another parallel with Bogdana and Wren and Oak and Madoc is literally Bogdana is trying to use Wren for power. It's the same thing and just in a different way and different kind of power. It's just so interesting. But I love that message. I love the message that came out of this was like, you may have created me, but I don't owe you and I don't have to let you manipulate me and I'm gonna fight against you. And then the biggest thing, as I said, Bogdana did really bad things. She put Wren in a position where she had to betray people to save her mortal family, and she had to put a lot of people in danger to save her mortal family. And Oak may not have had that exact situation, but he completely understands having a mortal family and feeling protective of your family and feeling like you owe your family and making sacrifices for your family. Also, the symbolism of Bex and Oak being stuck in an acorn, but Wren and Oak, much like Cardan and Jude, they're so tragic and I love them. They see each other, the true versions of each other, and I love that so much. I mean, that's the thing all four of these characters have in common, is putting on a mask. And much like them, they both get together in the end, making me clap my hands and kick my feet and scream and cry and be very happy. Screaming and crying and being very happy. That's an interesting combination of things, but they all happened. And as I said with Oak's magic before, him having that, like, Wren's literally becomes creation, but Oak, thinking it's so destructive, he ends up saving Wren with it. He uses it to create love, to use that love to save somebody. I loved that. I loved that arc, that development there. I think Oak really needed that, and I think I really needed to see Oak experience that. Finally, disrespectfully, F you Randallin, all my homies hate Randallin, and we're happy you're gone. He sucked so much. So much, so much, so much. Okay, so random things I love from the story, even though this was all very random. First one being Oak finally having a realization about how hard it must have been for Taryn and Jude being in the fairyland once he showed, like, this is him kind of having a flashback telling a story about how when he showed Heather, like, his true self as a kid and he, like, took off the glamour, he was, like, so excited to show her and then she was terrified. He had a realization of, like, oh, these are completely different worlds. This is going to be scary for mortals. I loved that because it was such a big thing in the original trilogy, how their Fae family never really understood what it was like for them to be mortals in that world. So Oak having that moment as a child, love it. Also, Oak and Jude working together to take down Bogdana, that little sword fight where they were like 1, 2, 3, and then they held the swords to their throat, her throat. Love to see it. Love sibling bonding. I think I even wrote that in my book. The parallel between Oak's I Know You and Cardan's I Knew Little Else But I Always Knew You. Holly Black will tell you to be loved is to be known. Love it. I love it so much. You have no idea. You have no idea. I'm shaking. Oak's entire speech on page 333, at least of the Barnes & Noble edition, 10 out of 10. Wren being a beautiful, terrifying butterfly. If you've read the book, you understand, and I love it. The return of the roach and the bomb, the way they're like family, 10 out of 10. Holly Black really, really treated us by having Cardan say he adores how terrifying Jude is in the prologue. She really saw us going feral for my sweet nemesis, my darling god, all that stuff, and said, you want some more? Bone apple teeth, and think I will forever be grateful to her for that. Honestly, every moment between them in this book, I ate up. I ate it up. I need more Cardan and Jude. I need more Cardan and Jude. Oh, and we know Cardan is not the fighter, that Jude is the fighter, but the way that he will fight for his family, the way he will protect Jude and just the whole family, we love to see it. Him once again using his cloak to protect her. The parallels in this book, can we talk about it? Can we talk about it? I've already talked about some of them, but I love it so much. And just the fact that Jude was called Knife Wife, that was very, very important to me specifically. Oh, and when Jude looks like she's wearing Cardan's shirt, when Oak says it looks like she's wearing Cardan's shirt, it made me remember the times in, I believe, The Queen of Nothing and The Wicked King where she wears Cardan's clothes. I love that she's still doing that. Another thing, despite the entire time Oak thinking Cardan doesn't trust him or doesn't like him, he really looks up to Cardan and emulates him and tries to emulate him and all that kind of stuff, and I was obsessed with that. I was obsessed with that so much. I mean, obviously I've said I love Cardan, so I really loved that. The side plot between Hyacinth and Tiernan, the complexities, the way that Tiernan is still like devoted to Hyacinth despite Hyacinth's self-sabotage. Tiernan seeing right through Hyacinth's issues with the royal family and telling him that it's actually his own family drama issues that he has. Go off. And when they reunited, I'm sorry, but delivering a line as raw as, I have to read it so I get it perfectly. I want to be loved for my worst self as well as my best self. I want to be forgiven my flaws. Holly. She knows how to do it to us. She knows how to give us lines that are going to hurt us to our core, and I love her for that. So many of my favorite romantic lines are from her books. Mostly from Cardan and Jude, but still, even Wren and Oak had some beautifully romantic lines. Tiernan and Hyacinth, like side characters. Holly. And just like Oak, like, I don't know if I'm in love with Wren because I don't feel how I feel when I'm pantomiming love, but I know I want to make her laugh. Like, he's like such a simp the entire time, but he even says like it's more than that, and the fact that she knows him and he knows her, it's just like, as I already said, she said to be loved is to be known, and I'm obsessed with that so much. In general, I really liked the dynamic between Wren and Oak. It's not too dissimilar from Cardan and Jude's. The biggest difference is that they were childhood friends. Like, it's not so much an enemies to lover story. So they have a more playful dynamic even when they're mad at each other, because that's just something they were used to, is that playful banter and like playing games and stuff, so they fall back into that so easily, and it's so cute. Something else that made my heart hurt was when we got the flashbacks of Oak learning about Lirio being his mom, and how he was such a sweet boy, and he was like, I just love love, and I love being loved, and I love the dogs, and I love the horses. Like, that goes with my whole thing of like Oak being like, I'm this manipulative jerk and whatever, and it's like, no, you're such a good boy. Don't lie, you're such a good boy. And as I talked about Oak being raised in the mortal world, something I really loved to show that was his room being decorated with stuff, not just stuff from Elfhame, but like anime posters and that kind of stuff. It was very cute. Also, I have the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, which has an interview with Holly Black where she's asked who her favorite characters are, and she said she doesn't have a favorite. She mentions loving some of the smaller characters, and she mentions loving Oak and Wren, but she said Jude and Cardan have a special place in her heart. Felt that. And she feels like Jude has more story in her. And the ending of chapter 24 might hint to, in another question, she said the ending of chapter 24 might hint to future stories in Elfhame. So I'm not going to say exactly what that is, even though I've given a lot of spoilers throughout this video. But please. So that is my review. I'm sure this is not the last time I will talk about these characters or this series, because as I mentioned, the original trilogy has a very special place in my heart. Jude and Cardan have a special place in my heart. I loved these books as well, and I don't, like, there's something, they're always going to have a hold on me. It could just be one of those things where it's like the time at which I read it and all that kind of stuff, that things just kind of really affect you differently. I don't know what it is so much. I've already said it could just be these characters, specifically the way they're written. I really like the way Holly Black writes. But I think just for some reason, these characters in these books will always have a hold on me. So if you also like them as well, like and subscribe, and I'm sure, again, I'll talk about them some more. I also have some more fantasy book reviews coming, fantasy romance reviews, and recommendations. Most of my reviews will be more spoiler-free because I'll do like monthly reading wrap-ups where I'll give shorter kind of reviews where I'm just kind of giving the gist of it and talking what I like and didn't like, while trying to keep things as spoiler-free as possible. And yeah, so like I said, like and subscribe. I love fantasy romance, and I read other genres as well. So yeah, see you in a week. Bye.